Canada's premiers are meeting today just outside Toronto for the first time as a group since the federal election. The campaign laid bare some regional divisions, and the premiers of Saskatchewan and Alberta, where the Liberals won no seats, by the way, have been especially vocal about their asks from Ottawa. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe and Alberta Premier Jason Kenney want Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to change the equalization formula, but there is unlikely to be consensus on that around the Premier's table. Ontario Premier Doug Ford says healthcare is a concern for everyone and that all premiers want a 5.2% annual increase to the Canada Health Transfer. But there may not be consensus specifically on pharmacare, which will be a key discussion Ottawa will have with the provinces, with Ontario sounding lukewarm notes about it recently, pushing instead for better coverage for rare diseases. Climate policy will be another tough area to get all parties on side. Ontario, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba have all launched legal challenges against the federal carbon price, while others have accepted it or launched their own programs. The premiers of Ontario, Saskatchewan, and New Brunswick met yesterday to sign a memorandum of understanding to collaborate on developing nuclear reactors known as small modular reactors. They say it could help meet emission reduction targets.
But they're making this out to be like the arrival of the apocalypse. This is ridiculous. This is, by modern Canadian fiscal standards, one of the most modest periods of fiscal restraint.
Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says critics of the United Conservative government's budget cuts need to tone down the rhetoric. He says Albertans would not take kindly to a general strike and is urging collaboration and cooperation.
I acknowledge and thank folks in the public service for the good work they do. I acknowledge that many have gone through a wage freeze, although it must be noted that in many of those professions they do get increases in their salary level with tenure, with seniority. But they need to realize that in many cases they receive better benefits and better relative compensation in the private sector, and that taxpayers cannot pay more. So I would say to those folks, let's sit down and work this out.
Yesterday afternoon at the GFL Memorial Gardens was another large test for the Hounds, who have not enjoyed much success to date. With a record of 10-15, 1-0, the Soo Greyhounds find themselves in the basement of the Western Conference. Their opponent, the London Knights, would be in the penthouse suite for comparison's sake. The game marked the first on the season between the two clubs. The Hounds would drop the contest 6-5 in overtime. The Thunderbirds entered their game Saturday night on a 3-game losing streak and took on the 5th-ranked team in the country, who was coming off a 9-3 win over the Sioux Eagles on Friday night. Second-year forward Avery Rebick would notch his 8th goal of the season into an empty net, as the Sioux would go on to defeat the Voodoos by a score of 4-2 at the Powassan Sportsplex. 10 people were shot and wounded early yesterday near the French Quarter in New Orleans, which is, of course, a popular spot for tourists. Hours later, in another part of town, another shooting killed 2 men and wounded 2 others. Police said both shootings remain under investigation, and authorities did not immediately draw any connection between them. 2 of the 10 people shot near the French Quarter were in critical condition in local hospitals. No arrests were announced by midday yesterday, and police did not immediately release information about any of the victims. Police officials told local media that a person of interest has been detained, but it was not immediately clear whether the person had any connection to the shooting.